Hello guys and welcome to another Thursday. This week's premiere, I'm not actually able to sit at the computer myself, so I might not be in the chat unless I can connect through my phone or something. But I've put together a little video for you guys so you can watch some low poly modeling techniques. Hopefully it'll be especially good for maybe new people, but even those of you who are super experienced, maybe find a little tip or two that you could find useful. Hello everyone and welcome to a little video where I'm just going to run through a bit of the techniques that I use for low poly modeling. It's been a while since I did that. And I thought I'd just dive into it and just explain as you go. This is not meant to be as a beginner tutorial. I'm going to make an updated one to my low poly modeling video. I'll just run through a bit. Maybe you'll find a few things that you have missed in the past. I get a lot of questions about this setup as well. And if you go to the shading tab here, you can see that I've got a palette texture. And you can download this one. It's in the description and it's just plugged into base color. And then I usually work in the UV editing tab. And if you go in the drop down here, you can see that I've changed it to texture. And I've also enabled this cavity look, which I get a lot of questions about. And I've set it to both types here and pull these sliders up to the top. I usually like to model this because it makes it easier to see. If I go tab into edit mode and select faces, I can, let's select all of them and do UV reset here. You can see that the texture is just like any normal texturing map. But I'm using this in a very specific way. On the left side here, I press S to scale, and then I press 0 on the keyboard, and that brings it down to a single infinitely small dot. And then I can place this anywhere on the texture and colorize. And I use this all the time to colorize my objects. So I'm just going to run through a lot of the stuff. Maybe you'll pick up a thing or two that you could find useful. And some of the most common one, of course, is E to extrude, which I do all the time. Hold the shift select to select multiple ones. Another one to combine with E is S for scaling, of course. E to extrude, S to scale. That's the thing. Another one is I to inset, so I and then E to extrude. Combine those, very useful. And if you hold, if you have multiple faces selected and press I, and then you press I again, then you swap between individual faces. You can see that at the top and non-individual. And if I press E to extrude, you can extrude them. And sometimes you don't want to extrude it like this. So another way useful, if I cancel that one, Control Z. So instead of E, I'll do Alt E. And then I'll do extrude along face normals instead. And that makes it possible to just scale it in the normal direction of the face. If you want to do multiple things at the same time, in many places, I to inset, individual, very good, and Alt-E, extrude along face normals. Sometimes you want to also extrude individually. So if I hold the Alt key and click on this edge, very useful too, it selects all the way around like this. Works in any direction like this. As long as you click, many people try to click on the face here, and it doesn't always get the direction that you want, so make sure that you click on the edges. That selects it all the way around. And here, if I do Alt-E and extrude, it'll do like a big thing all the way around it. So sometimes you want to do these individually, so I'll do Alt-E, and then you can do extrude individual faces instead. This is useful if let's say I wanted to create a cogwheel or something here. So another useful thing I do, a lot of useful stuff here, is select a face and do Shift-D to duplicate it, and then right-click, snap it back. And if I wanted to do a cogwheel here, here's a short trick as well. I often right-click on a face and do subdivide to split it. And then I've enabled here in preferences. This is a bit all over the show, so take it for what it is. I've enabled two things mainly. It's not loop tools, and I've also got auto mirror here. And with loop tools, you get access to these things here. So when I've got this selected that I subdivided, I can click on circle here. And you could, of course, you could just add a cylinder instead, but I find a quick workflow in low poly modeling is I'll just do Shift-D, snap it back, right-click, subdivide, and then I do circle, and then I can scale it and extrude, and then inset. And now I hide individual, so I press I again just to get the uniform one, and then E to extrude. So if you wanted to create cylinders like this. And if I wanted to do the cogwheel, let's have this, and instead of multiply selecting all of these, you can press L when you're hovering over something, and that'll select that, and it'll toggle it. You can do Shift-L to deselect as well. So L to select that one. I'll do E to extrude, and then to learn what we did to make the cog, double-click A to deselect. I hold the Alt key and click on this one to do a loop select all the way around. And then here we could do Alt-E, and now I do extrude individual faces. And then you can scale them, but see now when I scale, it goes all the way in, and it's because the default scaling is through to the median. If I press period on the keyboard, you can switch here from median to individual origins. So now if I press scale, it scales them along its individual origin there instead. So this could be a useful way to do cogwheels. If I press L to select the link, because I'm still in the same cube object here, that could be a little bit confusing for some too, but I often do a lot of the stuff inside of a single object, not to tab between in and out of edit mode. I tend to work a lot in the same object like this. If I press L to select the link, move it up here, look underneath. Let's say we wanted to create a hole through here. You could do a bool thing, but I often select them like this. I'll do I to inset. And then here's another very useful one. If you wanted to make a hole through there, right click on these with them selected and then do bridge faces. And that automatically creates a cut through there. That works here, for example, as well. I'll do I to inset, right click, bridge faces, and that cuts a hole straight through there. So that could be useful. Another one that I do a lot is Control R, of course, which is loop tools. No, not loop tools. It's called loop cut. And you can use the mouse wheel to scroll up and down. And then when you click once, you can also select where you want them. And if you want it to be in the center where it was, then you right click to snap it, but you still have to press the left mouse button again to fix it in place there. And when you start to combine these, if you want to do sci-fi looky stuff, I often do this. I hold the Alt. You can combine it with Shift as well. So if I hold the Alt key first, it'll select the ring around or a loop around like this. If I hold the Shift key as well as Alt and click here, I can select multiple ones like this. And if I do I to inset now, you can inset the whole thing. And another useful one I do is if I press S to scale this, it scales it. Woo. If I press Alt S, it looks a bit similar. So that wasn't a good example. But I tend to use Alt S a lot, and I think I'll find a better place to simulate that one. If I do here, I'll do I to inset, S to scale. You see now when I scale, it just scales it in the face. You don't really get an extrusion at the same time. So I often do Alt S, and it's actually shrink and flatten, and then you can do this technique. If I do inset again and Alt S, I can do this. So I do this a lot for, again, sci-fi panels. If I did for the Lion War game, for example, for all the factories and things, I tend to do that technique a lot. So if you Control R, loop cut, Control R, select a few of these, I to inset, Alt S, select these, I to inset, Alt S. And that's how I usually create panels. And you can type in values as well. If you want it to have the same amount, which is quite often for these panels, I'll do I to inset 0.1 and then Alt S 0.1. And then you can do that down here again. I to inset 0.1. Oop, did it wrong. I to inset 0.1, Alt S 0.1. That's quite useful. Sometimes you also want to slide things along the edges here. I've got some, I think I did some weird stuff up here, but never mind. Let's select something here. This one, for example, if I press G to move it, I haven't said about that, but it's quite a common one, G. But you don't necessarily want to move it in a weird way. You could press X, Y, and Z to lock it to the axes here, which is very useful. That works for nearly everything when you extrude and stuff. So you can always click on X, Y, Z to slide it. You can also press Shift Z, and that locks it into all the axes except one. But instead of that one, if I press G to move it again, and then G again, it actually slides it. So that could be quite useful if you're going to create paneling or something. G and then G again, and that slides it nicely like this. And we can combine this with I to inset 0.1, Alt S 0.1. Another thing I do a lot is Vertex Snapping. And if I have, if up here, these little 4 dots here, I usually always have this set to Vertex. And when you do low poly modeling, it's very useful. If I press tab into, I was in tab in edit mode. Let's say I wanted to move this one out to be exactly in line with this one. If I were to try to move it like this, some people would like try to align it manually like this. And if you don't see this one, you can either click on this move tool here or press Shift Space and G to get this little manipulator, I think it was called. And then you can move it in a specific axis direction by clicking on the arrow and dragging it. But how do you know when it's actually to the same exact distance as this one? That's when you hold Control, and then you can move it to that vertex. So that's why I often have it at the vertex snapping here. You could do it face, edge, here again, slide it and Control key, and you can make sure that you move them to the edge. So if I wanted to do this, I mean, there's multiple ways to do this, of course. There you go. Another thing I found quite recently that I haven't used that much, but I might be incorporating that a little bit more into my workflow. It's this one. It's called Add Cube, and the shortcut for that is Shift Space and 9. And then you can just click like this, drag it up, and it creates a cube. And it'll actually align it to the faces that you've got. So click, drag, select, click track. And I haven't actually used this workflow yet. I have a feeling that I'm going to find quite a lot of use for it. That also work with, you can switch here to cylinders. So if I hold the shift key here, it'll make it uniformed. Drag it up, and then you can still access these. So I think it's a shortcut. Maybe this has been there forever, but I haven't really used it that much. Another thing I do a lot is beveling. So if I select edges like this, and you can press that one, for example, and press Ctrl B to bevel it, and use the mouse wheel to bevel in multiple ones like this. And if I wanted to create something like a, I don't know, like a newspaper thing, and usually you want to do that at the same time, so I should shift select both of those, I to inset. But Alt D I do often, and then extrude long face normals, and then here again we could put like a fake glass. Right, hold the Control key to select from here to here. So Shift selects individually like this, but Control selects from the shortest distance. Sometimes it'll pick you in the wrong direction, so you might have to trick it a little bit sometimes to get it the way you want. But I'll hold the Control key there, and I to inset, and then maybe I'll do I to inset again, and Alt S to scale or flatten it down. And then here we could actually go to, since I created this from the new one, I didn't get the material that we had from this one. If you want to bring the material across from this one to this one, select the ones that you want to bring it to. So I shift select these that I created. And then I last click the one with the correct material, press Ctrl L, and then link materials, and that'll bring the materials across. And here we go again. Since this is just a normal UV map, press Tab to go into edit mode, A to select everything, and then on the left here, A to select everything, S to scale it, and then 0 to scale it down to 0, and then you can pick a color that you want for this machine. So if you wanted to pick let's say it was tinted glass on this one, you'd put that there. Shift select these, G to move this one into there. Sometimes you ended up in a quirky situation where you have multiple faces. Let's say you accidentally extruded this one, snapped it back, and then you think that everything is pretty good in life, but you see that it's not, it's broken. So there's a quick way to get rid of these two, and one way is to click A to select all of them, press M as in mother, and then merge by distance, and you can see down here removed 4 vertices. And now if we go back, those have been fixed here, so that's very useful too. Sometimes you want to dissolve some edges too. Let's say we had a lot of geometry. This one's totally broken, so let's ignore that one. But sometimes you have something that you want to delete internal faces. Let's say we had subdivided this one. So right click, subdivide. And let's say you don't really want this anymore. You want to dissolve them. So there's a few things where you can do. Either you can press 2 to go into edge select these, press X, and then dissolve edges. And there's a few things that might work better and worse for you. There's also stuff called limited dissolve. It'll do the same thing, but sometimes it saves a little bit of the geometry that you want to keep. So have a look at those different ones. And you could delete faces altogether. So if I press X or delete and then do face, that'll take that whole face away. And you can fill these in again. Sometimes you want to clean it up, or you accidentally deleted something. Then you can fill this in again. And I usually go to, if I double click A to deselect, press 2 or go into edge select up here. You can shift select a few of these. And I actually see that I've got a few unnecessary vertices here that I didn't really want to keep. And then if I actually could do a shortcut and hold the Alt key and select all the way around. And now you can fill this in by F. So that'll fill it in nicely. Sometimes you want to do, let's see if I just, let's grab this one. Shift D to duplicate it, E to extrude. And here comes another one actually that's useful. See, if I do this one, if I were to extrude it in the wrong direction, it looks like weird. And that's because it's the back face. So I also suggest that up here in the drop down, make sure you've got back face culling. Otherwise you might have inverted faces here. So make sure that you have that on. And here then, let's say we wanted to do this. If I did the Control R to loop cut this one a few times, Control R to loop cut. And let's say I accidentally deleted a bunch of these, like maybe like this. Or maybe I had to delete them for another reason. There's a way to fill this in, because if I were to hold the Alt key and select all the way around here and press F, it just fills it in as good. Oh, I have to select these two. F, then it fills it in as one giant polygon here. And often you want to keep the grid-like formation there. So if I press F3 and search for fill or grid fill there, and that tries to do a job, but apparently it didn't actually succeed. So in this case, I'd probably do this. I'd fill that one in manually, and then I would try it again. Alt select there, F3, and then do grid fill, and it still doesn't work. So, okay, I'll do here. Then you have to get into these, so F, and we still have a single phase here. Another one to fix that one is Control R. That puts a loop cut, but you can actually do that on an edge too. And here comes another one that's useful. If you shift select two of these, you want to create a line between here, press J, and that actually links them up nicely too. So now maybe we can do the grid fill. So I'll alt select that one, right click, or no, F3, and then search for grid fill again, and that was it. So that could save some time if you want to do that. And some other useful stuff is up here, proportional editing. So I often use this one, and you can toggle between, if you do the drop down here, you have connected only or not connected only. So if I go into face select or vertex select here, and then do G to move it, you can see that it actually proportionally drags stuff up. And if you use the mouse wheel, you can drag it, so you can use it in different amounts. You can also change here to random, for example, G. That randomizes it if you want to create some terrainy things, or you can change the different types of curves that it extrudes with. Not extrudes, moves. The difference between connected and not, which is also toggled by Alt-O on and off, is that, let's say I'm in the same object here as this one. Let's say we had something. I have no idea what this is supposed to be. But if I have this one to connected only, then it only does if it's connected. Surprise. So if I do, even if I've got a big proportional thing here, and even if it's the same object as this one behind, it doesn't affect this geometry because it's not connected to this one. But if I do Alt-O or click up here so you get the little fill-in circle, now when I move, it'll affect everything around it. One thing that I actually recently found out, which is very, very useful, is sometimes, let's say you wanted to, I'll find one that's good to explain this one on. Let's say we had, let's do this one. Let's do a lot. So Shift E to duplicate that one, E to extrude, and move it to here. Control R, loop cut that one, Control R, loop cut. Here, if I hold the Alt key now and select here, and then I'll do Alt E to extrude along face normals, you can see that it doesn't actually uniformly extrude it. It's calculated by the normal angles. So often you don't really want this different bend there. So instead of doing that one, do Alt E again, extrude along face normals, but then hold the Alt key to toggle even thickness. And from all my years of modeling, I actually missed this one a lot, so that one's saved me a lot lately. Because I tend to do this a lot. I do Control here, I'll do I to inset, and then I'll do Alt E to extrude along face normals. And here you can see that it's not really evenly intruded, if you call it like that. But if you hold the Alt key, it does it. So I tend to do these type of operations a lot for my buildings and all the modeling work that I do. So it's a real lifesaver. Alt E, extrude along face normals, and hold the Alt key, then that'll toggle that little wonky thing that you had going. This also works both for extrusion there, but also if you do the Alt S. So if I do I to inset, Alt S, and you can't really see it now. Let's do a better example. I to inset, Alt S, and then if you hold the Alt key, you can see that it'll do that very nice thing of even thickness. One more thing, if you wanted to do a pipe or something, or anything cylindrical, like I said before, I often use this workflow where I do Shift E to duplicate, right click, subdivide, circle, and then E to extrude it. And if I wanted to put a bend on the pipe here, I would do Shift S, cursor to selected. And you can even go one better. I'll click on that vertex there. I toggled it into one here to vertex select, Shift S, cursor to selected. And then I want to slide the cursor a little bit here in this direction. And either you could go here to view and slide this location of the 3D cursor on the y-axis. Sometimes I think that's a little bit tedious, and I found it quicker for me is that I'll just click this vertex here. I'll E to extrude it, and then either press Y or press the middle mouse button. Then I can sort of say how far I want to go. But let's say I wanted to go all the way to there. And then I do Shift S and then cursor to selected, and that makes it jump. It just saves me going into this menu, but I understand if that's not good for your workflow. And then I just delete that vertex again. That was only to get my vertex to a really good location. Because now if I select these faces here, and then I do this spin tool, and you can toggle up here between the different axes. I want to go around the X axis, and then here, drag it, hold the Control key, that'll snap it into even 5 degree. And go to 90 degree, you can see down here, and you can also change how many. Usually for the low poly look I go a little bit less like this, maybe 4 or 5 or something. And if I go back here, I'll just do E to extrude. And here's one final thing that I'm going to mention in this video, I think. It's going to be a quick, rapid one. But here, let's say you wanted to copy this one and merge it to this side. You could, of course, do like the auto mirror or something like that for the mirror modifier. But if I do Shift D to duplicate it, because not always you're going to apply a mirror modifier. And if I go tab into edit, oh, I was in edit mode. Scale, you can actually do -1, and then on the x-axis, or y-axis. So -1, I'll do that again. Scale, Y, to lock it on the y-axis, -1 on the keyboard. That flips it. But you can see now, since we had the backface culling here, that this one is inverted. And you can do Shift-N to recalculate outside. If I can press Ctrl-Z, if you want some more options, you can do Alt-N, and then you can either flip the normals, but I often use this one, recalculate outside. So now, with the Vertex Snapping, if I hold the Control key, you can see that it's not snapping to where I want. I wanted to ideally have it to snap to here. And to fix that, you can go up here, and then you can do active or close. It wasn't closest. You would have thought maybe that it would snap, but it's actually snapping the center of this object to the closest there. So instead, sometimes I do this. I press 1 to go to vertex mode, and then I just shift-click and shift-click to make this vertex active. Go in here and select that snap with active. And now when I slide it, it'll snap it to that active. And now I know that these verts are exactly in the correct place. So then you could click L to select all these linked here, and then do M merge by distance, and that removes the 9 vertices that were around there. So now there's nothing. But then doing that, I actually have an interior face. So that might not be ideal either. You might want to, in that case, delete these first. But then we could do what we did before, but we did it to cut holes. If you wanted to connect these, you can do Shift select those, right click, and then do bridge faces. That obviously works in this direction too, which is really good. And to put stuff like features on the pipes, I often do Alt select ring like this, and remember you can do multiple, I to inset, and Alt S to scale them down, and you can do shading, like change the different colors of the pipes and stuff. So that was a little quick video about low poly modeling in Blender. I hope you found a few tricks maybe that you haven't seen before. So until next week, take care, and I'll see you then. Bye for now.